On the evening of April 16th, a 25-year-old beauty queen walked into the administrative office of the local church and mysteriously disappeared. At that time, another person in the office was a 27-year-old young priest. 5 days later, she was found dead in a nearby canal. Regardless of post-event evidence or witness testimony, everything pointed to the priest as the murderer. But despite solid evidence, the perpetrator couldn't be brought to justice. Was there a dark force behind this case? The family pursued justice for 57 years. Can this delayed justice still be called justice? What exactly happened back then? Hello, welcome to the Crime Documentary Files channel. Let's travel back to 1960 and review the case. McAllen is the largest city in Hidalgo County, Texas. According to the 2020 census, the city's population is about 142,000, and it is separated from Reynosa, Mexico, by the Rio Grande. On April 17, 1960, around 3 a.m. on Easter, the McAllen police received a report from someone claiming that his daughter went missing while confessing at the church. The police immediately went to the scene to investigate. Early in the morning, officers found the car driven by the reporter's daughter near the church. The missing girl was Irene Garza, 25, who lived in McAllen. Her parents ran a prosperous dry cleaning business. Irene was beautiful and very intelligent since childhood, excelling in both high school and college. She was the first in her family to attend college. At 24, she participated in the Texas beauty pageant and won the title of Miss South Texas Sweetheart. She was also the beauty queen of her university, gaining local popularity and attracting many young men. Not only was Irene beautiful, but she was also kind-hearted. After graduating from college, she taught at a school in a poor neighborhood, often using her salary to buy supplies and clothes for impoverished students. A devout Catholic, the church played an important role in her life, and she attended Mass every morning, enjoying this simple and happy life. On the evening of April 16th, around 6:30 p.m., Irene told her family that she was going to the nearby Sacred Heart Church for confession and would be back soon. Irene usually acted with discretion, never worrying her parents, so they were at ease letting her go. But by midnight, Irene had not returned. Initially, her family thought she might have stayed at the church for midnight mass. As time passed and she was still missing by 3 a.m., her parents, feeling something was wrong, rushed to the church to search for her. After searching in vain, they reported her missing. Irene was a goddess to many young men, some of whom would go to the church just to catch a glimpse of her. The police interviewed people who had been at the church the previous night. Many remembered Irene, a prominent figure. She was last seen wearing a white lace veil, a light blue shirt, a black printed skirt, cream-colored high heels, and carrying a black purse. Witnesses saw her making the sign of the cross when entering the church, kneeling in the 5th row to pray, and later leaving the confession line. Importantly, no one saw her leave the church, and the priests also reported no outsiders lingering inside. So, where did Irene go? 2 days after her disappearance, a high heel was found by the roadside in McAllen, identified as the one Irene wore the night she vanished. The next day, her black purse was found 300 meters north of the shoe, containing her driver's license. Further north, her white lace veil was discovered. The item seemed to have been discarded from a moving vehicle, suggesting she was kidnapped and left clues intentionally. Realizing this, McAllen authorities mobilized extensive resources to search around Sacred Heart Church. Many local residents volunteered, making this search the largest in the Rio Grande Valley's history. 5 days after her disappearance, Irene's body was found floating in an irrigation canal. Except for her shoes and underwear, she was almost fully dressed. The autopsy revealed head injuries from a heavy object, signs of assault, and death by asphyxiation within 4 days of her disappearance. Many clues were lost due to the body being submerged in water, stalling the investigation. In the following period, police interviewed about 500 people, including Irene's family, colleagues, friends, and local sex offenders, conducting over 50 interrogations. Her family offered a $12,500 reward, a significant amount at the time, being the highest reward ever offered in a local murder case. Later, a businessman added a reward of up to $10,000. As the case progressed, a suspect quickly came into the police's view. Various pieces of evidence and clues pointed to an unlikely perpetrator, a priest. Many witnesses saw Irene go to the parish house around 7 p.m. on the night she disappeared. Typically, Catholic clergy residences are used as administrative offices for the local parish, usually near the church. Irene went to see a 27-year-old young priest, John Feit, who was the last person to see her. He had just returned from training at St. Anthony's Seminary and was assigned to the Sacred Heart Church in McAllen to assist other priests in hearing confessions and conducting midnight mass. John claimed that Irene wanted to confess something very private, so she went to the office instead of the confession room. About half an hour later, he returned her to the church. Due to confidentiality, he could not disclose what Irene confessed. However, other priests in the church stated that John's behavior was against the rules because church policy required confessions to be heard in the confession room. Additionally, during the post-midnight mass coffee gathering, they noticed several obvious scratches on the back of John's right hand. John explained that he accidentally broke his glasses while hearing confessions and, without a key, had to climb to the second floor of the rectory to get another pair, injuring his hand in the process. John said he returned Irene to the church and then went to the parish house to rest for a while. He returned to the confession room around 8:15 p.m. to continue working, felt unwell around 9 p.m. and went back to the parish house for a quick smoke before returning to the confession room. At 10 p.m. he drove to the seminary to get his glasses, but didn't bring the key and injured his hand while climbing. He returned to the church at 11 p.m. for the midnight mass. However, people waiting to confess said the line outside John's confession room did not move around 8 p.m., suggesting he was not there, and they had to queue at other priests' confession rooms. The medical report showed that Irene died later on Easter Day. John was busy that day. He held Mass at 9 a.m., took leave to fix his glasses, drove back to the seminary 11 kilometers away, but couldn't fix them, returned to the church, and asked another priest to drive him back to the seminary around 1 p.m. He stayed there until about 4 p.m., then went to the church for the Mass. He returned to the seminary around 7 p.m., said he had left something at the church, borrowed a car, and did not return until around 10 p.m. Normally, an 11-kilometer drive wouldn't take 3 hours. John explained that when he returned to the church, Irene's parents asked him about her. He denied saying anything unpleasant to her, and then, feeling upset, drove around aimlessly until 10 p.m. before returning to the seminary. Despite John's suspicious behavior, there was insufficient evidence to link him to Irene's disappearance. Shortly after the incident, the police drained the canal where Irene's body was found and discovered a green slide projector with a long black cord and a candlestick from the Sacred Heart Church. The projector belonged to John, who claimed it had been missing for a year and didn't know why it was found near Irene's body. Despite the implausible story, many couldn't believe John was guilty due to the high regard for priests at the time, considering the accusation itself blasphemous. However, the situation changed with the appearance of a young, beautiful 20-year-old woman, Maria Guerra. She told the police that about 20 days before Irene's disappearance, she was attacked by a man near her home church in Edinburgh, about 20 kilometers from McAllen. The man wore black pants, black shoes, a cream-colored shirt, and glasses, clearly resembling a priest. Initially, he sat in a blue and white car watching her. Despite feeling scared, she ignored it because she was near the church. That evening, while praying in the church, she saw the man sitting behind her. Suddenly, someone grabbed her from behind, trying to gag her with a cloth. She resisted, spat out the cloth, and bit the man's left finger hard, forcing him to flee. She reported the attack, but the police couldn't find the attacker until recently, when she heard that Irene's murderer might be a priest, prompting her to come forward. In early May 1960, McAllen police arranged a lineup, and Maria immediately identified John Feit as the attacker. Photos taken at the time showed that John's right hand still had unhealed scratches. John denied attacking Maria, claiming he had left the church over an hour before the incident and had injured his left hand on a mimeograph machine. However, several priests and church staff confirmed the injury looked like a bite mark, and the mimeograph machine couldn't cause such an injury. Moreover, John had indeed driven a blue and white car to the church that day. John was then taken to the police for interrogation, but he continued to deny both attacking Maria and having any involvement in Irene's death. In June 1960, the police conducted multiple polygraph tests on John, but the results were not released, only stating that John had passed. This raised further suspicion about John. The media picked up the story, causing a significant stir locally and becoming a topic of widespread discussion. However, just when everyone thought the case was about to be solved and that John was the culprit, there was a dramatic turn of events. John was sent by the church to a school in Chicago for further study, and the officer in charge of Irene's murder investigation was ordered to stop the investigation, with all case files handed over to higher authorities. As for Maria's assault, John was charged with attempted assault, but the trial ended in a hung jury. Eventually, John pleaded no contest to a lesser charge of assault, paid a $500 fine, and the matter was resolved. In 1963, 3 years after Irene's death, John was transferred by the church to a monastery in Missouri, leaving McAllen. Irene's family and local residents believed that some underhanded deal was made between the church and authorities. Many speculated that because most elected officials in Hidalgo County at the time were Catholics, and John Kennedy, a Catholic, was running for President of the United States, local officials and the church reached some agreement to protect the church's reputation. Under the church's protection, John moved through several monasteries and even got promoted. Irene's parents were told by the church that John would be severely punished by the church, more so than any court could do. In reality, about 10 years after Irene's death, John left the priesthood, married, had children, and moved to Phoenix, Arizona, living a happy life while volunteering at the church and being active in charity. In stark contrast to John's happy life, Irene's family lived in the pain of losing a loved one. Over time, Irene's case faded from public attention, becoming a cold case. However, Irene's family never gave up. 42 years later, in 2002, the Texas Rangers Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation into Irene's murder. Upon reviewing all the evidence, investigators found that everything pointed to John, now a 69-year-old former priest. This time, a new key witness emerged, Dale Tasheni, who was John's psychological counselor at the Missouri monastery. Decades earlier, Dale had known that John had attacked women. His job was to ensure that if John was deemed unfit to be a priest, he would leave the monastery without posing a danger. John had confessed to Dale about his urges to attack women from behind, especially when they knelt before him, and that he disliked the sound of high heels. To help John resolve his issues, Dale guided him to talk about his hidden thoughts. John admitted that he had murdered a woman named Irene on Easter, and had never told anyone due to the confessional confidentiality as a priest. However, He was troubled by the suffering Irene's family had endured over the years and wanted to come clean before he died. Dale recalled John saying that he was attracted to Irene's beauty and suggested she confess in the parish house. There, he violently subdued and tied her up, took her to the seminary dormitory, and assaulted her the next day. After returning to the church for Mass, he moved Irene to a bathtub, covered her head with a bag, and when he returned in the evening, she was dead. Panicked, John disposed of Irene's body in a remote ditch and scattered her belongings along the road. Shortly after the incident, John confessed his crime to the church, but the church, fearing scandal, covered it up. Dale's testimony was damning for John. Investigators allowed Dale to confront John over the phone, but John denied ever confessing to Dale, which was expected. If John were truly the culprit, more people would know. Indeed, two more witnesses soon emerged. One was Joseph O'Brien, who had served with John at Sacred Heart Church. John had confessed to him about killing Irene, and shortly after Irene's disappearance, Joseph and another priest saw scratches on John's right hand. Joseph had remained silent for years out of duty to the church, but was tormented by guilt. Another witness was the polygraph expert who tested John. He stated that John tried to control his breathing to calm himself during critical questions. Initially, the police report said John passed the test, but it was later changed to inconclusive, with the expert believing John never passed. In 2003, investigators confidently presented the new evidence to local prosecutor Irene Garza, who refused to take the case to a grand jury, citing inadequate initial investigation, lack of physical evidence, and questioning Joseph's credibility due to potential senility. This led to suspicions of collusion between the prosecutor and the church. Under public pressure, the case was finally presented to a grand jury the following year. However, key witnesses like Dale, Joseph, and the polygraph expert were not called, resulting in no indictment for John. In September 2005, witness Joseph O'Brien passed away at age 77, and other witnesses were also aging. Just when it seemed the case might never be resolved, a breakthrough came 54 years after the incident. In 2014, local prosecutor Irene Garza lost his re-election bid. The newly elected prosecutor had promised during his campaign to review Irene's case. This time, all evidence was presented to a grand jury, which finally decided to indict John. In 2016, 83-year-old John was arrested at his Phoenix home and extradited to Texas for trial. In December 2017, 54 years after Irene's death, John was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, bringing closure to the case. John died in prison on February 12, 2020, at the age of 87. The tragic case of Irene Garza underscores the crucial responsibility of both the church and the authorities in ensuring justice. Despite overwhelming evidence, the initial failure to act allowed a murderer to live freely for decades. The church's cover-up to protect its reputation and the local authorities' reluctance to pursue justice illustrate a grave misuse of power and trust. It wasn't until persistent efforts and new leadership revisited the case that justice was finally served. This story serves as a stark reminder that institutions must prioritize truth and accountability over protecting their own interests, and that justice, no matter how delayed, must always be pursued. That's the story for today. If you found it compelling, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with my future videos. Your support means a lot. See you next time.